Welcome everybody to the Do Your Part webinar series. If this is your first time checking out our webinars, welcome. If this is your third or fourth, welcome back. We are so excited to have everybody joining us today. Today we are doing a super exciting topic, managing the munchies. And what's even better about this is we have two dietitians on. We have myself, who's Andrea Shackle, and
Brandon. Brandon Gruber. I'm one of the other dietitians at Revive. I thought it'd be pretty cool for us to do this one together as a little bit of a conversation style webinar. So I really hope you guys enjoy everything that we have to talk about today.
Awesome. This is such a cool topic, Brandon. I'm so glad we're doing this. We're going to cover some really neat stuff today. But we should probably say who we are, where we're kind of from, I guess.
Yeah. You or me?
So both of us are dietitians from Revive Wellness, and that's where the series and my view plan, and that's where we've been coming from. I'm registered dietitian, diabetes educator, and I work with Brandon. Usually we're side by side at the office, but now we're doing this from home, hey?
Yeah, our offices are side by side, but now we're side by side in a webinar. So there you go.
Yeah, so we're gonna make this happen today. Okay. So topics covered, we're gonna get everybody to kind of think outside the box today. Food and mood, what's the connection? We're really going to talk about comfort eating. It's my favorite thing to talk about. The other favorite part is the roles that food play other than just nourishment. Did you even know we eat with more than just nutrients? How do we actually manage? That's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, is 10 awesome tips that we've come up for everybody, and how do we kind of manage this in the future? So yeah, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it. Now, when I read these stats, I was interested when I read these stats originally, when you first shared them with us. People saying that they have increase in reported snacking, and we have U.S. and Canadian data here. 26% admitted finding comfort in chocolate. Now, I'm curious as to how this compares to before COVID.
Yeah, me too. I think I would be really curious, and I hope they come out with a little bit more studies on that, maybe moving forward, because they've really pinpointed, like, really specific to chocolate. So I don't know if that was maybe because around the Easter time. I am not really sure, but I don't know about you, Brandon, but I've noticed myself even kind of craving things that maybe I wouldn't have before.
Yeah, it's and we're hyper aware of it too, because the messaging is all around us. Whereas before it was there, but it wasn't kind of shoved in your face. Whereas now it's like, oh, people are snacking more, which might make you look at it yourself with, more of a fine-tooth comb, I guess.
And everybody is making things and cooking things that, that are everything from this whole bread craze. And then there was another food craze that was just kind of coming on too, of like, holy cow, food is everywhere, I think more than before.
Very good. Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
The interesting part though, and I think Brandon, you would agree too, is that this, when clients come in, they're always talking about, okay, you know what we need to eat. I need to know how to eat better. But most people know that they're supposed to eat better and eat healthier. But when it comes down to, should I choose the apple over the cookie, I feel like the apple doesn't even have a chance. The cookie is always going to win over.
100%. I've said this or thought this many times before. So, I mean, just because we're dietitians doesn't mean that this doesn't happen to us. But I would agree. A lot of people say that, I know what I need to do, but I'm not doing it. And so I guess that's one thing that I'm really hoping with today, is kind of shedding a little bit of light on what outside of willpower is doing the work with a lot of these choices that people make.
Yeah, and to let people know that most people do this. This is a very common response. It's not something that's abnormal. Everybody does it, right? From dietitians to, everybody out there will have reported this for sure. So why does this happen? Let's talk about that, Brandon.
Let's go into a little bit of biology here.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of the words that we talk about here aren't going to be too crazy. We'll try and explain them as best as we can. But there's two major systems that we look at when we're thinking of food and mood. So we'll talk about the first one. The first one is called homeostatic system. So this is the drive to eat in response to hunger, signals in your body that are telling your brain that energy stores are depleted. It's managed by hormones that are present in your gut, in your blood, in your adipose or fat tissue. Basically, this is the type of system that's going to help keep you alive.
This is we need to eat. We need to eat to live, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then there's the other one. You want to tackle the other one?
Yeah, the hedonic system. This is basically the brain saying whether or not it wants to go through with all of this. So it's basically saying, should I eat this? Did I have a positive experience? Did I have a negative experience with it? Do I like this? Does this taste good? The interesting piece about this, and I think it's a really complex system between the homeostatic and the hedonic system, is that the hedonic system can actually override the homeostatic system. So we might be hungry, but the brain might say no, or it might be saying, you know what, I'm going to ignore those hunger cues and do something else, or I'm going to let the hunger cues go on for a really long time, and then boom, all of a sudden we're really hungry. So the system is not quite fully understood, but it's very complex.
Yeah, they can work together, but they can also fight with each other, it seems like.
Yes. And sometimes our brain makes most of the decisions, right? Or I've even heard people say that the brain is on autopilot. So we're not waking it up enough to be productive in the conversation between the stomach and the brain. So it's kind of cool. But it causes a lot of problems.
Right. So what is emotional stress or comfort eating? Well, if all of you watching can imagine, based on what we just talked about in the previous slide there, what you might think is going on here, well, the first point pretty much sums it up. So that hedonic reward system is active. Emotion, pleasure is running the show, as opposed to just worrying about nourishment and nourishment only. And keep in mind that this can be positive or negative. And we'll go into a little bit about that later. But this is where, again, keeping in mind, we all do it, but it looks different for everybody. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's brain is different. That's like a huge fact. So we can't assume that these systems are running the same for everybody.
Yeah, that's so true. And the more we're going to talk about it is that people's comfort eating or emotional eating hit at different times. It's not, always the night that people talk about. Sometimes it's during the day or at work. So lots of different things can drive this. And based on those stats that we put up earlier, that 46% of people are snacking more. So we know that it's happening. And if we think about the stress that that everybody is under right now, it makes sense that during stressful times, we would see something like the comfort food popping up for sure.
So this would be a good one for all of you watching this to think about before we get started. We all know we're supposed to eat good food because it's healthy, provides us with nutrients. However, this is not always the reason why we eat. And this is something that we talk a lot about, not just as in the context of food and mood and managing the munchies, but the why. And I think that's a really important point to understand. Wouldn't you?
Well, Brandon, I would think that it's probably one of the more important things, but it's also one of the things that people forget about. They just think about the nutrients and the vitamins, and then they forget about the why. The why to me is that piece that either opens the door or closes the door. If we never work on the why, we're never going to be able to figure out what the problem is. And if we don't, then we're continually going down a path that's not getting anywhere when we look at a wellness journey. So it's, to me, it's like the hugest piece.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it takes work.
It does take work. I will definitely say that, and looking at my own experience for sure. So let's look at this next part here. This is we could have probably made this like gigantic if we really wanted to. We really could have made this massive. But what comes to mind when you look at this?
Oh, this, I can't think of any sort of event, social interaction that doesn't include food. When I think about my family, when I think about gatherings of get together, I mean, even meeting friends, it's always like, hey, where should we go to eat? Or what can we bring? Or let's get together and eat something. Like, food is a huge part of our cultural footprint, right? It's wrapped up in tradition. So food is something that's passed down from generation to generation. Yeah, so from a positive experience, it's wrapped up in a lot of those for sure. Yeah. So that's what I think about.
Mm-hmm. And then we look at the negative experience part, which is probably what comes to mind a lot for all of you that are watching this. But I mean, not everything is negative with the pandemic that's been going on, but a lot of it is, and that's usually most of what people think of when they think of emotional eating, things like that is more of along the lines of negative experiences, negative emotions, things like it. But again, it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and I think now, with COVID for sure, because of where the stats are with the how people are feeling around with anxiety and depression, that's kind of following suit. But I also think about the role in food in terms of like a yearly cycle. So, during every month, there's usually a celebration, but maybe during the winter months, it's harder for people, with the winter blues or whatever, we might see a pickup of eating over that. So it very much can be up and down, like depending on the seasons too, right? So, but it also can be just something as simple as, oh my gosh, that tastes good. And then that brain remembers of like, oh, when I ate that donut, it was so good. So it must mean that it's good and to crave it more, right? When you're looking for a positive experience. I just find the role of food fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So this is a really powerful thing, I think, before we get into the 10 tips that we're going to talk about, because a lot of things that are happening for everybody right now seem like out of our control, which sucks, but we're going to go through some things that provide you with more control, that some of you may be able to control right now, maybe in the future. Maybe you can control all of them. Maybe you can only control a couple of them. But these are some of the common ones that we find with our clients, and that have been shown in research as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, what you had just said, Brandon, like the control is right now we feel everything is out of control. So when we look about how we want to get through our health through all of this, even one or two of these tips that we're going to present today could be that start of feeling in control of something, right?
Mm-hmm. So for those that are watching, if there's a point that maybe not as applicable to you, we have 10 points, so you can jump around if you need to kind of look at the different points quickly and look at whichever ones might be the most applicable, is to be more efficient with your time. So the first one here.
This one, is so funny. It's the first one, it seems like from a dietitian, this would be one of the first ones. We do know that there is research to show that if we are eating regular meals and snacks, that can help with the overeating later on. It can help with the hunger cravings that kind of just seem to come out of nowhere really hard, really fast. It can also prevent that kind of stacking up is kind of a term they use at the end of the day. So this one seems very basic, But it's also very individual. We've got on there, you can see like some people might need 1, 2, or 3 snacks depending on, you know, kind of what you're doing. But eating regular, it's huge. That just means part of that routine thing that I know we've talked about in other webinars, of that keeping that routine, and eating meals or eating regular meals and snacks right now can be part of that.
Yeah. And the term regular, yeah, is dependent on the person. But as an example, think of a time where you maybe weren't eating as regular. Maybe your day was busy. You get to the end of the day, and then, you know, whatever you're doing at the end of the day, if you're seeing your family, your friends, whatever it might be, but then potentially your mood might not be as positive in the evening. This could be one of the reasons that could be causing that. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next piece is related to that, but this one we picked out one specific nutrient out of the previous part, protein. Having protein at each meal and snack. Protein is one of the 3 main macronutrients that contribute to energy intake. It's one of the ones that contributes to caloric intake, calories. And what this one does, it's really important for things like fullness, digestion, slowing digestion of food, making sure that there's a slower rise in blood sugar that happens after you eat. And for most of you out there, if you've ever experienced a sugar rush and a sugar crash, then you probably not the nicest thing in the world to experience, which talks about the next part about stabilizing energy. And another one that is a little bit more general health related, but very, very important nonetheless, is maintaining muscle mass and supporting muscle mass, which contributes to any movement that you are either planning or not planning to do as well.
Yeah, I think the protein one is a great thing to work on. I find when we work with clients, and Brandon, you probably agree too, is that people actually forget to put protein during their beginning of their day. Like they forget kind of at that breakfast meal, because we only think protein at supper time, but really having that protein at the meals and at the snacks can really help with that. So, you know, don't just focus on supper, but just try to get protein throughout the rest of the day as well.
For sure.
Okay, hydration. I'm going to be perfectly honest here, Brandon. Since working from home, significantly gone down from reflecting. I don't know why, but hydration is very, very important. It helps with energy. It does help with mood, especially for a lot of people. I don't know, I've been talking to a lot of people where, you know, we're on our screens more, the virtual stuff, even headaches, and we're forgetting to kind of take breaks and drink more. So we do know that it can help with kind of mood and cognition, as well as, you know, exercise. If you're getting out a little bit more, trying to burn some stress, with that, it's very important for your kind of peak performance to be able to do that, as well as stress. I know if, you know, you're dehydrated, your heart rate goes up, feel a little bit more, it's more like anxiety like feeling, but it could actually just more be hydration. So really awesome hydration tips that I probably should take myself is keeping water bottles right near us. Which
I
I'm
got
so
one
used to
with
doing
me
at my
right
desk.
now.
I actually do. See, I'm working on it. One of the things which, you know, if anybody's ever been at our office before, we would always have like infused water, which, you know, that could really be anything right now, like frozen fruit, whatever you kind of have around. But yeah, keeping hydrated is a big one. And it can also help kind of the feeling of fullness too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we picked another one out. This one, I'm going to challenge you to see if this one sounds a little bit like another nutrient we already talked about. So finding fiber, this is one of my favorite nutrients. This is the carbohydrate that people forget about. This is really similar to protein. Keeps you fuller for longer, helps slow digestion, slows the rise in blood sugar. So all of these things help contribute to a more stable energy, stable, potentially stable mood. And if you're not experiencing a rise and fall in energy, your hunger isn't coming screaming back in a half an hour or an hour after eating, a lot of those things make it easier for you to tolerate things like stressful situations and things that might instigate you a little bit more or something like that. And
Yeah,
also really helpful for gut bacteria too.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I feel bad for fiber sometimes. I don't know if you can feel bad for a nutrient. I'm not really sure. But people always only associate it with either constipation or bowel movements. And we forget that it does so much more than that. Like, it's a huge component for that digestion and fullness piece. And I think amongst, where we get lost with nutrition, we forget about fiber quite a bit, I find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of foods that have a lot of fiber in it. If you've ever looked at the nutrition label on beans, it's like half a cup or cup of beans is, you'd be shocked how much fiber is in there.
Yeah, and our fruits and vegetables, which funny enough, we're usually low intake of fruits and vegetables. So when we're low in fruits and vegetables, then we're naturally low in fiber. So this one can actually be a really, I don't want to say easy, because when we talk about food and mood and comfort eating, it's hard, but this one can make a really big difference for people.
Mm-hmm. I love this next one.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of take away from kind of the food pieces now, and to me, we're going to start to get into the tough stuff. This is where we need to put the homework in. This is where we need to stop, ask those really tough questions, and go down that rabbit hole. And journaling, hands down for me, when people come in, they're wanting to talk about the cravings, this is the biggest part of that. Journaling is so important for self-awareness. I mean, half the time I can't remember what I ate yesterday. So if it's not written down, or what I was doing yesterday, I can't remember, right? That's difficult. So journaling, although hands for sure, it's hard work. Nobody ever wants to do it. It's boring, all those, nobody wants to do homework, right? That was just kind of the whole thing from school. Nobody wants to do homework, but it's the information that we can get, right? That's our self-awareness. We can pick out the trends and patterns. We can better pinpoint the problems and solutions. So if we're wanting to work on this, we have to figure out that why, right? Why we're doing this, or what's kind of happening. But there's more than just food you can journal.
Yeah,
right?
you can, there's all kinds of things. Really, the basis here is whether it's for food, nutrition, if it's for your mental health, if it's for exercising, anything. You're becoming more self-aware. You're trying to find what's working well, what's not working well. You're trying to find problems if they're there, trying to find a solution. And this is a basic framework that you can apply to anything. And really, whether you call it journaling, whether you call it, some people call it something different. It's one of the things that our most successful clients do consistently.
Yeah, hands down. And I'm pretty sure there's, can't come to me right now, but there is research in the States showing like some of the top 3 things for health is journaling. Like it's quite, yeah, you can learn lots about ourselves with it.
And this next point, kind of piggybacking off of that, is mindfulness. And basically the idea that, engaging the brain in decision making, the ability to focus and refocus and be aware of what your mind is doing at any given moment, not necessarily doing anything about it in any given moment, but you're just there, you're just being with it.
Yeah, it's very much that whole trying to use the cycle of the hedonic and the homeostatic cycle, right? Like if the brain isn't in it, it's not going to make decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? So the mindfulness, if we're constantly on autopilot and not ever checking in, then we're never going to be able to start breaking some of those cycles.
Yep. So here's a little bit of some graphics here that you guys can take a read through. Basically, it's being really neutral with everything when you're doing something like this. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I sometimes do these types of things when I'm going for a walk. So.
Yeah, you can be there's lots of different ways to be mindful. Lots of times I'll have, people not have, we have phones everywhere now. We have the TVs on. We're glued more to the TV, right? Based on those stats that we had posted earlier. All of a sudden that's starting to get in with also our eating experiences. So we're, watching the news, but we're also eating at the same time. We're not really knowing what we're doing. We're not really paying attention to any signals. So that's a really simple thing that actually we can do, is just kind of, when we're eating, we go and sit at the table and we turn everything off. And let me tell you, it's going to feel awkward, and you're going to be in this silence, and you're going to be like, I don't like this feeling, because that's what I hear most, right? It was weird, but it's a good time to be like, okay, then what is it about this experience that I need to work on, right?
Why does it feel weird to begin with?
Right. Yeah. So I think that's a huge one. But there's also a lot of experiences to me that I've heard around, the mindfulness of eating food. So if we are eating it, we are, noting how it smells, and we notice how it tastes, and we're taking the time to chew, right? We're not inhaling it. We're taking the time to chew it, whatever it is, and be present with it, right? Like if I'm going to have a treat, I want to remember that experience. I don't want to just fly through that experience.
Right. So some examples, we kind of went through some of these already, but think outside the box with this for yourself. It doesn't necessarily have to be, sitting in a quiet room with some like really quiet, soft spa-like music playing. It really can be anything, and it can be applied in any scenario.
Yeah, it's very much that saying, right? Stop and smell the roses. That's basically what trying to be present and mindful is. And we can definitely do that in nature. I know we do that one a lot, like going for a walk, no phones on. We just want to be outside.
So this kind of lends itself to the next point quite nicely.
We're getting into the harder ones.
Yeah. Stop and reflect. So this one is where journaling can come in handy, but we wanted to give this one its own little piece because it's super important. So have a look at these questions. Some of the things that you could ask yourself at any given moment. But the big thing is everybody's going to do this one a little bit differently. And the little parts that we wrote on the side about how do you reflect, this can be done anywhere using any device. You don't even need to write it down if you really don't want to, but it's going to help you go back to it later if you want to.
Yeah, I like this one. I find it very much piggybacks on the journaling, but it's taking it that next step. So I oftentimes will have a lot of clients go, okay, if you figure out that your problematic time is at work, or your problematic time is in the evening, okay, so now we're going to stop and reflect specifically during that time. What's going on at work? How, what am I doing at work? Did I have a good day? Was I having a stressful day? Same with the evening. So you can really pinpoint that reflectiveness to a very specific time that you're really trying to identify and work on, right? So to me, it's always coming down to, once we know the why and we kind of have done some digging, now we're gonna figure out the questions of what's driving that decision at that time. So again, and I feel, Brandon, we might have done this well because we've built up, right? To the pieces, because these start to dig up. They could dig up emotions for some people, experiences. This is where kind of you're starting to dig through the layers a little bit.
And it might feel weird at first doing these types of things, but the big thing is it might take a little bit to get into a groove, but if you're just doing it just to do it because somebody told you to, even though it might take a little bit to kind of get into the process at first, but if all of a sudden you're just finding yourself just sitting and thinking about stuff, but you're not actually thinking about how it applies or why this is happening, then you're not necessarily getting as much value as you could otherwise be getting from it. It's better than doing nothing, but it's not to say that there's a perfect way to do it though.
Yeah, you want to be productive in this, right? This is where it takes work, and it does take some dedication to it for sure. I love this next one. This one goes very hand in hand with emotional eating, or comfort eating or stress eating. And that's because usually we're trying to reduce or soothe a feeling or an experience that we're having. So the one thing we know is that self-care is a really big part of that. And I can't tell you how many clients that I've worked with, even including myself along my own journey, where it's really easy to forget about ourselves. It's really easy to do everything else and take care of everybody else, and then forget about the one person who we have to take care of, right? So the self-care piece is huge. I know at our clinic, that's a really big message that we constantly talk about, is the self-care. It's not just good for physical health, but it's good for mental health. It's good for emotional health. When we're well, it's easier to help other people. It can improve with self-esteem, confidence, happiness, mood, stress. I don't know. This one is just so important. And right now, with where we're at, this self-care piece to me just got really a lot more important.
Yep. And there's a few different ways that you can do it. Again, I've talked about this many times. It doesn't have to be fancy. It looks different for everybody. The themes of this is how you engage your mind, how you fuel your body, how you move your body in ways that are the most enjoyable to you. But some of these could be challenging for some. I know finding time to exercise can be challenging. If you have a hobby or activity, but finding the time to do that is challenging. So it's not an exhaustive list of what you could potentially do.
No, and when I find when people are new to self-care, or they don't really think about it, they think, oh, they need to be having 45 minutes to an hour set aside to do this. But really, self-care can honestly start with 5 minutes, 5 minutes of me time. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be, the whole spa like self-care piece that some people think about. Could just be something really simple as going to bed early. That I use that one a lot with my clients. Like, if you're tired, go to bed. The laundry can wait.
Yeah. And again, leapfrogging into this one, which is all about you and making sure that's where the focus is, because it's self-care, being kind and realistic. And you kind of almost talked about this point in the previous section, where you don't like it when other people are rude to you. So why would you do it to yourself? That makes absolutely no sense.
Right. It's we are so hard on ourselves, and I don't know if that's the culture that we built on. We have to be on all the time. We have to be perfect all the time. So all of a sudden now we have to have our health in check all the time. I think that follows suit. So when we remember to just bring it back to like, okay, what can I do? What am I capable of doing? And taking the time to do it, right? You at the end of the day are the most important.
Mm-hmm. And being patient is a really, really key to all of this.
That's such a hard one, Brandon. The patient piece, so many clients will be like, okay, well, when am I going to have this figured out, right? Like, how many months or how many weeks, like, 21 days am I going to be over this? The patient piece does not happen overnight. When I look at behavior change, emotional eating usually lingers around the longest because it's the hardest. So it doesn't happen overnight. But yeah, be patient.
And remember that, again, you're the focus. This is your journey. You might be on a journey with somebody else, your partner, friend, family member, but the main focus should be on you. At the end of the day, setting goals that are important to you, challenging yourself, but making everything that you're doing still doable. That's where the realistic piece comes in. But don't do it solely because of somebody else. That's where, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be kind to yourself and do something for yourself. And you're not necessarily being kind to yourself if you're just doing it because somebody else told you to, or because you saw that somebody else was doing something and thought it was a good idea, but you don't know why you're doing it. So this one happens a little bit as well.
Oh, for sure. And I think actually now is a good time. I've been talking to a lot of people about, when I think about gyms are closed and I think about they can't go out and all of this, and all of a sudden everybody's feeling like their health goals can't move forward, right? Like, what am I going to do? So I think now is actually a good time to refocus that. And yeah, maybe we can't do what we could, but what can we do, right? So finding things that, Brendan, you and I talked about right at the beginning, like what can you control? And that's part of these goals to set now of like, okay, like what is doable right now? I might not be able to do what I did, but what can I do right now?
And the bottom 2 points there about aiming for a slow but consistent process, and that's very situational. Slow, consistent process is ideal because it's practical and realistic, but progress in any given moment can look different, right? It can look different now than it did a month ago. Progress later on might look different than it is now, and we need to recognize that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, number 10. This is we kind of put this one at the end, and I feel this is part of it because emotional eating, comfort eating, stress eating, whatever we want to call it, is usually done out of a way to soothe or comfort an emotion. So sometimes the strategies don't work, or they open up a can of worms of emotions, right? As soon as you take food away, you've left very vulnerable emotions if you don't have tools for that. And for some people, it's very important to seek out help for that. And it's okay to not be okay. And I think that for people who are on a really long journey and who've been on this and maybe struggling this for a really long time, that usually food strategies aren't the answer. Usually we have to go a lot deeper and be able to find strategies that can actually deal with the emotions. So you know what, talking about it, I love the saying and hashtags that are going around right now. It's perfect. Like, it's okay not to be okay. That's a really big one with emotional eating, is like, you know what, we can work on that one and we can get help for that. There's a lot of really good help that we can offer for that. So yeah.
And there's a whole team of people that can help you. I know when I'm working with people that are having a lot of this going on, and emotional eating is something we want to address, or it's an issue that's difficult, I often bring up that while you came to me to address it as a registered dietitian, I absolutely love working on things such as this with Faye, our psychologist that we have on our team, and it goes hand in hand, and I prefer it, but it's not always something that everybody is used to, but it's something that can definitely complement the experience for sure.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on you, Brandon. Like, for sure, whenever I've worked with a client, that extra support is so needed. It can kind of bring clarity to everything. It also kind of takes that load off of like, oh, you know what, there was a reason why I was choosing the cookie over the apple, right? Like, I know what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's awesome that where we work, we have a psychologist. But we also know that not everybody has that, or maybe has access to that. So I've always been a big encourager to, actually just go talk to your family doctor about that, or, a healthcare professional, or, there's lots of different terms for them: mental health clinicians, health behavioral consultants, which around the Edmonton area, that's kind of what they're called. But if you never ask, or never, be that advocate for your own health, then you're never going to know what doors could be open. So I think, seeking that help can just take everything for you for the next level. And it comes back to putting you first, right? And sometimes this is what is first.
I agree. Yeah. So this is a question that I feel like gets asked a lot.
This is $1 million question, Brandon.
And I don't want to quash anybody's hope out there, but at the end of the day, the answer is no. And I feel like you do a very great job of explaining why. So maybe I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, you know, I wish the cravings could go away, but that would mean our emotions go away. And we're full of emotions at all different times. So it's not fair to say that we're never going to be stressed again, or we're never going to, you know, have an anxious moment again, or we're never going to celebrate with food again. Like, it doesn't ever fit like that. So yes, the short answer is no, they never go away. But what does end up flipping, and the more work you put into it, is actually the intensity or that lack of willpower feeling. So a lot of people will come to Brandon and I and will say, I just have no willpower, like, you know, something got to be wrong with me. But what happens is when you put the work in and you start to reflect and you start to put together the why, then it switches that paradigm to be, yeah, you know what, I am having a craving, but what can I do about it? Hey, you know what? I just got 10 tips that can go in my toolkit. Maybe this time I will try that. And sometimes it's going to work, and the next time it's not going to. And that's okay. It's just putting that control back for you. Does that sum it up?
That was perfect. Yeah, I love it. And kind of with this next one, is it okay to continue to eat treats? This one, well, the short answer is yes, but this one is completely up to you. It's not up to us. It's never up to us.
Yeah, it's never up to us. This is, you know, we live in a food society. I don't know how we would ever not engage in it. And I don't know, when I think for myself, when I think of quality of life, I would never want to turn a really special treat down. Like, I don't want to live that way. And so that's part of how we make it work, right? I have tons of people who come to me and they'll be like, Andrea, please don't take XYZ away, right? Like, please don't tell me, you know, you're going to take it away and you're going to be the food police. And it just crushes my heart to hear that, because they are a part of who we are, and they are a part of our culture and our cultural footprint. So, but we can do them in a more positive light, for sure. And that's basically kind of what we've talked about, right? That we can be mindful when we're doing it. We can set boundaries with them. That could be how much it is, how often, and not feel guilty about it. It's the guilt that drives, that's another one of our emotions, right? That will drive some of this eating, is the guilt. And then it turns into a vicious cycle. So this one's very much determined. Yeah, as Brandon said, it's pretty much up to you how you want to do it.
All right. So we come to the end. We've talked at length. We could talk for hours about this, I feel like, but we don't want to keep everybody here to watching us for hours and hours and hours. But here's some of the things that we covered. We'll try and sum it up as best as we can in this little bit here. One of the big things is just recognizing that all of this is completely normal. It's natural. This is just the way that the human brain works, the human body works, and everybody has a different, mental health path, emotional path from the day that you were born all the way up until now. And a lot of that has a play and a role into the choices that you make. But now, what do you have?
You have 10 tips in your toolbox.
Yes. So practice, practice, practice. Yeah, some of these tips will apply, some won't.
Yeah, this does not happen overnight. I've always encouraged people with tips like, you know what, if it doesn't work the first time, don't worry about it. Try it again. Don't give up on it right away. So practice for sure.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a person that just, naturally, genuinely is not a treat person, that's okay. Totally
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. And then, yeah, reaching out for support. Dietitians are a great start for that. I know we work a lot of that at our clinic. So dietitians, we can very much help out for that. But reach out. Emotional eating, it can be difficult, and if you're struggling with it, we need you. We can help. We can
Yeah,
support you.
we're here to support. You can visit our website, revivewellness.ca. You can visit our team bio page. There's some links earlier in this webinar. We have a 7-day week of wellness with our digital wellness program, My Viva Plan. So you can check that out and get some good content there. That kind of talks a little bit about the stuff that we talked about today. And then we also got all of our social media accounts as well, both Revives and My Vivas. So check all those out. We put up all kinds of goodies, some related to what we talked about in this webinar and some not.
Yeah. If you have any questions on the webinar, just find us on social media and say you saw us here and got a question, and yeah, we'd love to get back to you.
Absolutely. So if like we said, if you want to reach any of us, there's various ways that you can reach us. It's been a blast to have this conversation with all of you. Hopefully you guys got a lot of value from it. Anything that you want to add, Andrea?
No, this is this was fun. This is an interesting topic, and I love that as dietitians we can do this, and hope somebody found something from it, right?
Yeah.
Picked up a tip or two.
We got a couple more coming too along a similar line, so stay tuned.